Social media commentary, satellite imagery, and other data is part of alternative data. It is created outside of the standard repertoire of data, but it is considered useful for predicting a variety of factors. With the availability of sophisticated machine learning analytics tools, alternative data is gaining traction within a wide variety of industries. In this episode of TechTalk, Carla and I speak with Benedikt Jonas, Digital Intelligence Lead, and Andreas Braun, AI Team Lead, here at PwC Luxembourg. We discuss the pros and cons of using alternative data to help businesses make better decisions. And off we go!
Welcome to a new episode of TechTalk. This is episode 19, season 5, and it's called The One on Unique Insights of Alternative Data. Welcome, Armin. How are you?
I'm doing great. What about you?
I'm good as well. The weather, it's starting to seem to
be getting better. Is it possible?
And, yes, exactly. Don't know for how long, but that's good. Spring is here finally. So today we have two guests. Do you want to introduce them?
Definitely. We have Benedikt Jonas. Benedikt is our digital intelligence lead here at PwC Luxembourg. And we are also joined by Andreas Braun, who is an AI team lead here at PwC Luxembourg. Two very fine gentlemen with two very exciting roles.
Exactly. Welcome.
Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
So we start by asking you, who are you? Can you explain a little bit more your role at PwC? Sounds very exciting, but what does it mean?
Should we start with Benedikt?
Yes.
Sure. So, Benedikt, my background is in marketing. Fields I've been in kind of like for the last 20 years with a sweet spot in kind of like brand measurement, customer insights. So kind of being the advocate of the voice of the customer, kind of like identifying their needs, and kind of like work that I have supported clients with across industries, and also kind of like in Europe, and I also worked in the US on that. So,
sounds very interesting.
Yes, indeed. I didn't know that you had a background in marketing.
Yeah, usually we get a lot of tech profiles on the podcast.
That's true.
And now we get actually somebody from business and marketing. Is very, very, very unique.
But I didn't want to come kind of like without the tech perspective, and I think therefore we have Andreas here.
Indeed. So it's one of the usual boring tech profiles that you have on the podcast here. No, I'm Andreas. I'm the AI lead, and I'm leading the team on data science and AI in our technology advisory. And I've been working on AI topics or machine learning topics for close to 15 years now, spent a decade of my career in research, and now since almost 4 years, I'm supporting PwC around those topics, helping our clients, but also our units to improve their value proposition on how we can really improve how we use data very intelligently, which leads us also to today's topic.
Exactly. Well, I must say you're definitely not boring, because this is like your fourth time here with us. So we really enjoy having you.
Thank you.
Okay. So the topic is data or alternative data, which actually I want to start by asking, what is alternative data?
So when we look at data, so we have kind of like classical data coming, kind of like internal data, kind of like survey data, like alternative data, I would say, are the kind of like new data sources that we can tap into. Kind of like social media is one. So there is actually also a lot of unstructured data. I think today 80% of companies' data is unstructured, and the difficulty is like, how can we make use of those unstructured data? So comments from customers and text. So how to get really into that data? And I think today we have kind of like, to throw a couple of buzzwords. So we have big data. So we have a lot of data that's out there. I think the amount of data is doubling every 2 years. So a lot of data. And then now we have the technology. So natural language processing, machine learning, and AI to really deal with those masses of data. So we have kind of like two conditions that are fulfilled to tap into the data. So
that's very interesting. I had never thought about it, and it's
we touched upon the social media, but I guess alternative data could go anything like satellite imagery, right? Or GPS could also be considered alternative data. It's maybe
absolutely. So kind of like all the, like we are producing, we have an iPhone in our pockets 20 hours a day. So we are like, that's generating a lot of data, looking at the Internet of Things, like again, a lot of data that's being produced and tapping into that data, always in respect also with the limitation and regulatory environment we are in. The keyword GDPR, what data can we use? So that's also something we have to face and take into account when we look into the, for instance, geolocation or like personal data into that respect. Yeah.
Okay, that's very clear, and it's interesting because we have so many smart devices nowadays, and they are very powerful sources of data within some limits, of course.
They are more commonly used for even marketing purposes, or from companies where you wouldn't expect it very much. So, for example, right now, if you look where to place stuff in your supermarket, your big retailers have started many, many years ago already with experimenting how people walk. They can use the smartphone. They are talking to a Bluetooth device that is placed somewhere in the supermarket, so they can track at all times where you are, how much time you spend, and at what products you are looking. And they use that to optimize their placement of all the stuff and take better insights than compared to their traditional survey or shadowing technique, because it just allows those companies to do these things much more cheaply than before.
Nice.
And sometimes with surprising effects. I remember the story, I think it was in the US, where like a retailer was targeting a shopper with kind of like pregnancy advertisement, because they had identified the type of product she was buying. She was probably kind of like pregnant in this targeting group, and the customer didn't know herself. So that's kind of like also like some surprising effects when you have the ability to apply the data on customer targeting.
Yeah, that can lead to so many different effects, I guess, on the consumer, but also on the market. What would be the consequence of that?
Exactly.
Right?
I think that it's interesting and can be beneficial to the consumer, but it's also a bit scary. And the other day I was thinking to buy a robot vacuum cleaner. And then when I read that, they also use it to get data from you, I was like, maybe not.
Okay. I never thought about you like as a robot vacuum cleaner.
Well, it's not me, it's my partner who really wants to have the robot because it cleans for you. But anyway.
Okay. Give some company as well. No?
Yes, I guess so.
So there's always plenty of data out there, but how do you make good use of it?
So it's really around asking the right questions. And I think when we look at data, there is the risk of bias. And I think that's something we have to overcome. So when I speak about bias, it's kind of like, for instance, a cognitive bias, confirmation bias, something I found myself sometimes in, which is kind of like we have an assumption and then we are trying to look at the data to confirm our point of view. And we're looking at the data, turning it down, kind of like just to confirm our point of view. So that's a tricky one, kind of like where you have almost to tap yourself on the shoulder and say, wait a minute, let's step back. That's not the objective, or like statistical bias where you probably don't have the representative sample that's not representative of the market. So that's something you have to be aware of, to have like a fresh and open perspective at looking at the data with different angles to see, okay, what is the data telling us? And it's also about how we phrase the question. So you can say, let's look at how positively this product has performed in this market. which is already very subjective point of view. Or we could look, how is this product performing? And you keep it more neutral and open. So I think that's kind of like a first element from good use of the data, kind of like to let the data speak and tune down your personal preconceptions and have a fresh perspective on this, and looking at different data elements to see what is the key story here.
Sounds very interesting. I like when you said that it's important to look at the data from different points of view. Are there any tools that you could use? I don't mean technologically speaking only, but that you could put in place either some training programs to upskill your people to do that, or how would that happen in reality?
Well, yes, right now already a lot of our jobs have to do with data. It's not only the data scientists, but everybody is using more and more data. And therefore, this is the way the world is going, and therefore one has to adapt their job roles and everything. We see that in education, where data-related roles in university are getting increasingly common. But most companies, ours included, is looking at some sort of upskilling program. So we have a digital excellence initiatives where we tell people how to move from Excel, I would say, to more advanced tools, to use more powerful query tools, to learn how to use data visualizations properly. Not necessarily learning how to do deep learning or doing these very hard AI topics, but really teaching people how to read data, how to appropriately make use of it, and very importantly, also going into the data storytelling. Because behind every data, there is somewhat a story that you need to tell that is answering the questions that Benedikt has been talking about. And this is a skill that is getting more and more important. It therefore it's somewhat on the intersection between communications and data knowledge. And therefore, this is one very important skill that we also focus on our internal training programs.
I think the storytelling that's a key point, and it's a difficult skill set because it's looking at, you have I would say some scientific profiles, and then the storytelling is really key, because often we look at data, or people say I need a dashboard with data. But then it's going beyond the so what question. So what is the story? Because we want to move from data to insights, but then also from insights to recommendation and action. And if you don't have like a compelling story, and you're not able to tell the story like with a narrative that supports it, but also like the visualization part is key. You can already by playing with visualization, you can have different interpretation of data if you use this visualization versus another. And it's like to see, okay, how can you make an impact if you're speaking to the management team of a company, and you're looking at data, how is the story and how is the data supporting this with the prerequisite that, okay, the data quality is okay. We have done kind of like our homework there, but then the storytelling part is the key part, and to make really an impact and use it really to have a better strategy, more impactful in the market, or to address customers in a different way, or to be aware of latest behavioral trends, etc.
I think storytelling is a very powerful medium, because it is also the oldest medium, right? Before we had writing or anything else.
And indeed, it's not just about having the data. You also have to tell the story behind the data and give context. I think that makes total sense.
Yeah, because it's at the end of the day, arising the emotions in people. And so I think that's an important element. It's not only that, of course, there's a rationale, but then when you do the storytelling, it creates the emotion, which brings me to our next question, which is nobody really likes then that story turns out to be fake. So there's an importance of data being reliable when you construct a story around it. So how do you make sure that your data is reliable?
Well, when we are looking, for example, at social media, so here we have a lot of textual information, a lot of image or video information that is coming out. And by one individual person, one can't put a lot on the reliability because people have an agenda, people might do a certain something, but there is something in I would say, the wisdom of the masses. We can counterbalance this lack of trust that we can put in individual data sources or in individuals by looking at the big picture, looking at what a large group of people is thinking, looking what a large group of organizations is talking about a specific topic. And then you start to gain more meaningful insights, because in the end, when the majority agrees on something, then there is probably something behind it. Of course, there are, as with all media, the danger of bots or adverse players that are trying to manipulate opinions that are also can occur in masses. So one has to be mindful of these effects. But in a sense, primarily we look for trustworthiness by statistics, by just looking at really big numbers, at the really big pictures, at a lot of data, where we can then make sure that by this, taking into account all of it, we then have a pretty good sense of reliability.
And then it's, I would say, still also the combination of kind of like the human brain and technology. So it's not that this is like fully automated and the machine runs and we take this. So it still requires like someone with critical thinking to look at this and to have make a judgment call there. And also, if you're looking, for instance, on unique authors as an element, so that's already also like an element to be more distinctive, to avoid that you have like a bot kind of like tweeting 10,000 tweets a day, kind of like to get this already out, like looking at different metrics already that can help you to increase on accuracy of the data.
So it's indeed you have the human element and the technology element; they complement each other, and that's very interesting. So, what sources do you usually use when in your daily work?
So when we work with clients, so our specialty is looking at all the data that's already out there in the digital sphere. So meaning data that's on websites, data that's in forums, in blogs, in the media, on social media as well. So I would say every digital communication that's before like a paywall or like a closed group. And that data is either kind of like complementary to the data that our clients have already. If the client runs a survey, for instance, like a customer survey, they have already some data and they get kind of like one view of this. So we bring in, and that's the topic here, like alternative data, kind of like bringing like an alternative perspective on and saying on your brand or on your product, there are already thousands or under thousands of data points. Let's look at how people are discussing your products. What are the topics? How are you compared to your competitors? So bringing this market perspective into the client's perspective. Because sometimes, speaking about buyers, so the client says, yeah, we have fantastic customer satisfaction, net promoter score 90%. So a lot of people who recommend us, so everything seems perfect. And then we look at, okay, how are customer reactions in the markets, and maybe find like a less positive view on it, which doesn't mean that the data is less reliable, but brings in kind of like just the voice of customers from a different perspective.
Yeah, because you can really game the NPS very easily. And the same thing is, for example, with App Store ratings of the apps. They prompt you to rate the app at the very specific points in time where they know that you had a good experience with the app and that you are the most likely to rate it 5 stars. And so you see a lot of apps actually have over time the average rating of the apps on the App Store has gone up way up from what it used to be.
I didn't know that.
That's very interesting. But that's, I think, a good moment to segue into a topic that we really want to talk about, which is measuring sentiment. What does it mean and why is it so important?
And what is sentiment for our listeners who might not know what it is?
Maybe I start quickly and then Andreas gives the technical perspective. So when we look at data, we look from a quantitative perspective onto it. So how much discussion is there on this topic? So kind of like a share of voice. We are looking at qualitative, so like what are the topics? So around topic modeling. And then sentiment is really, I would say, the key differentiator. How are those topics being discussed? Positively, neutral, or negative, which are really then differentiating also when you put it in light to your peers in your market. Are we discussed more positively or more negatively?
And there are various means on measuring this. So essentially sentiment, we are looking mostly at textual data in this aspect. So we are performing natural language processing in different shapes and forms in order to look for the cues that we want, including the sentiment. But it is, say, traditionally one would use keywords. So let's say kill is something negative. So obviously there is a pretty negative element around it. And you might associate a negative element, therefore a negative sentiment to the overall evaluation. But when you look at the surrounding words, those are very important and very key. And that is where more modern machine learning or AI techniques come in that can take a lot more of this content into account. So for example, I'm going to kill you is quite negative, I would say, whereas you're killing it is then a very positive sentiment in the English language. And therefore, one has to take this into account. In the last few years, modern sentiment analysis techniques that use also deep learning are taking more and more the context into account and are allowing us to assess not only the sentiment of a single sentence, but of longer paragraphs, of longer texts, even separating it out. So therefore, this is one very important element. One can also expand it to image data, where you look at the content of an image and to see if there are birds in it, or are there specific scenes that are naturally attributable to, for example, a brand logo. You can also look at audio data, at the voice, at the pitch of your tone, how you speak out words. So when we're looking at audio data, this can also be taken into account. For example, there have been experiments in suicide hotlines to see if somebody's really in distress, or if somebody's really negative, or if it's something more of a joke call. Not that you want to filter them out, but you really want to get a sense of the urgency in these instances. And so therefore, for all these different categories of data, different techniques apply. Some of the times it's also quite easy. So when we have a 5-star rating and you have the 5 stars with some, of course, caveats, as Armin just mentioned, that there's also ways to game these to these ratings. But these ratings are, of course, also a simple and very quantitative measure to also take the sentiment on a specific product, brand, or idea.
So how reliable would you say that today's sentiment is? How much can you count on it today?
I would again have to come back to the wisdom of the masses. So if you just find 2 or 3 opinions that very, very, very broadly, then it's really hard to get a good overall sentiment, because then you're looking at very sporadic events and can't tell too much out of it. But then if you look at, a food manufacturer that had thousands of negative posts on Twitter, then you get a better sense of it, or somebody who has been a company who has had a scandal over scandal over scandal in traditional media, and you always associate the brand name with the word scandal or similar words or similar sentences or sentiments around it, then you get a better sense of it. So you have to we have to take into account a lot of data. Again, big data comes in. We use automated systems to assess all of that. And the more data we have, the more reliable our picture is, and then the more nuance we have. Because for many of large products, you will find a lot of negative, some say negative sentiment, maybe also some good sentiment, and some a lot of neutral things. And then you can dig deeper and filter out what were they actually talking about when they had a positive sentiment. They might have been talking about a specific feature, and when they were talking negatively, it was maybe about something completely different. And then you can draw really the good insights that help you then shape the future or the next steps in your improvement of the product.
And sentiment can also reveal, like, again, some surprising insights. Like, to give you two concrete examples for client work that we have done. So for one client, we were looking at how is this new product performing, and we saw a lot of negative comments in a certain region. And looking into the data, it was like consumers were complaining that the product was not available in that region, which revealed like an issue they had in their supply chain, like supplying the retailer with that product. So something that was not at all on our radar. Thanks to sentiment, kind of like we spotted this. Another one in the automotive side was like we were looking at an automotive brand, but then discovered there was high negativity around like windshield wiper, like this particular element, which was highly negatively discussed. And when we looked into this, so it wasn't working properly, and something that goes back then kind of like to product re-engineering. So something that was not at all initially on our radar, but kind of like where sentiment kind of like can lead you to some new paths where you have to be open and curious to see that. Yeah,
that's very interesting that you can guide the product development through the use of sentiment.
Exactly.
That's nice. And how do you filter out the fake news when you are determining the sentiment? And should you be doing it? And what would be the pros and cons of that?
So what we have been doing, for instance, for a pharmaceutical client, so that's kind of like borderline, kind of like conspiracy theory and fake accounts. So I think what's important is to quantify it, to see how much discussion, how much buzz is coming from those, and be very cautious then, kind of like on how you interpret the overall results. So. And from a technical side,
I think that from a technical side, there are of course means to absolutely filter it out. So companies such as Twitter or any other social media companies are having teams that are trying to work on those topics to filter it out. It often has to do with what we call then the bots, things that have been very created in a very short term, are spreading out a lot of information very quickly, and then they stop communicating, and some other thousands of bots are popping up. So there are technical means in trying to see the pattern in how those bots are generated and what kind of content and how quickly it is put out, because a normal human has a hard time in writing 10,000 messages in a minute, to give a very simple example. And let's say for the more known, for the more known sources of fake news, you also will see that the content teams target those specifically. So where they will actually look at content before it is posted or released to the broader public in order to give an assessment if it might be trustworthy or not. So these are some of the things that we already see in the market. But as Benedikt mentioned, it's not always so relevant to filter it out when looking at it from an analysis perspective, because we want to get a sense, as we post the right question, how much fake news or how much negative, how am I targeted by negative opinion on the internet? Are there bots that are targeting my company, my brand? I want to know that information. But the question is, how is my general sentiment? And then filtering out this data. That's that more part of your typical analysis. So in the end, from a data perspective, I would say give me more. It's always better because I can draw more insight and answer more questions. But of course, the social media companies want to keep their networks more or less civil to a certain extent, at least, or enable a civil discourse, and therefore they might prevent me from even getting that data, which as a data scientist always irks me a little bit. But that's the way the world works, and we have to make do with what we are being provided.
That's up to discussion now regarding Twitter. The future is quite uncertain for Twitter now. Okay, so what are the main concerns clients have when it comes to quality of data?
So like a question that we often get, like how is this data, so especially looking at social, like reliable, because we have, like to my previous example, we have our survey and survey data. So there it's to really look at the different steps that we have from data sourcing, what kind of like data sources we include into there to the data cleaning. So really have this hybrid approach, like a human brain looking at the data and then kind of like a machine also, where we speaking about sentiment and machine learning, where you have like a default sentiment that's applied, but then looking at sentiment in a specific context and saying, no, this is actually not neutral, this is actually negative. So the algorithm can learn and apply that. So really have like a rigorous approach that we apply from the data cleaning part, kind of like with this mix of humans and technology.
So how is that different from a survey? What are the main differences between, let's say, the primary research that you do in the form of an interview, a survey, other means, and versus the research that you do through the sentiment analysis?
Well, I think both are very important sources of data, and both all of them have their pros and cons, so to speak. So in your survey, you have people that really have an incentive to fill out this survey. Therefore, if you are talking about a marketing survey, the person has typically been paid or given some incentive to fill out this survey, and therefore they are maybe more likely to put a positive opinion, and they fill out this survey in a preset amount of time. They really focus. They really usually take time. Okay, I mean, of course, there's always people that put average on everything, which is something that you also have to look at analyzing the survey. But it's a more formal process. You get generally good quality data if you ask enough people, because then you also have the statistical validity. But something that is, for example, lacking is the spontaneity or your first reaction to something, these topics like that. So market research has been looking at alternative data, for example, looking at trying to have a camera point at you when they present you a product, and then they can check with the movement of your face muscles how you might be reacting to that. So also using AI technologies to analyze this. But in the end, the big advantage of looking into what is already available on the internet is, first of all, the mass of data and the availability. It's much less effortful than sending a survey out to 10,000 people and waiting for all of their responses, when instead you can take some piece of information from 20 million people and try to get the same statistical validity. So the disadvantage is, of course, the data is of less quality in each individual step or in each individual opinion. But therefore, you need more advanced analytics techniques or AI that drags all of the information from all of the sources on the internet, and then you might be getting a more and bigger picture. So, ideally, all of those sources are combined in a way, so you can draw the most insights from your study. But then, of course, it depends on the client, what they are being used to and what they prefer as a methodology, and of course also, how much budget and time is available for the exercise.
And I guess the data you gather online, it's also more authentic because people's
it's out
in the
there
moment.
in the wild.
It's like when people are frustrated or when people are super happy. So it's in the moment kind of feedback.
And there you have also to take into account like the cultural perspective. Where you have countries who are more like outspoken or sharing more emotions than others. So that's also something to into account. In some, or for some cultures, it's not appropriate to express negative elements. So you have to take that into account, like from a cultural bias perspective, to see. And other nations are very outspoken and like to speak a lot of negative elements.
And probably you can also see differences in gender as well, how women and men complain or not in a different way. I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud.
Can you give us some concrete examples of how you apply alternative data to help your clients make better decisions?
Yes, so that's kind of like the key objective of what we're trying to do. Like, how can we help our clients to make better decisions? And if we say better decisions, for us means being more in line with market perception, like with market expectation and customer expectation. So how can we be like a better player in the market for our customers, for different stakeholders, but also for society at large. And to give you like a concrete example, this was for like a real estate company looking at the sustainability topic. So the key topic that's on everyone's agenda. So they were looking at sustainability as a real estate company, and their focus was primarily on the environmental aspect. So how to insulate the building. So that was their key priority. And when we looked at the perception of this company in regard to sustainability, we discovered actually that the market and different players like investors, customers, were discussing more the social perspective of sustainability, meaning affordable rents, affordable housing, really having this social element. So bringing this new perspective then to the client helped them to realign, reshape their strategy to have like a more balanced view, including also the social perspective, and then also like measuring over time, is this improving? So that's again bringing this outside in perspective to make sure that you are aligned with what your customers are really looking for, that you want, that they need from you.
But on a general note, I guess that sustainability is a very important brand attribute for everybody today. So how do you measure that versus your competitors?
So yes, sustainability is, I would say, the topic for all our clients, for ourselves as well. And what we do there is like looking from the consumer point of view, but through the lens of sustainability topics. So this can be kind of like very broad on ESG, so environment, social, and governance, which gives you, again, like an alternative perspective, like a market-driven perspective to some more traditional ESG data that's out there from that looking at kind of like the internal company data from ESG. And then making sure that, because the ESG and sustainability topics are really different depending on your industry, to make sure that what you have identified for your company as the key sustainability topics, how is market perception on those, and are you missing something? Or if you don't have a strategy yet, to see in my industry what are topics, so to help you then to define the strategy and then monitor it over time.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yes. Andreas, would you like to add anything?
On the topic of sustainability, however, I mean, an overarching approach is necessary. So Benedikt just alluded that the company internal data or our hard KPIs are, of course, crucial when measuring this. And it's not always only about how the public sees you, how the public sees your products or your brand, but it's how you build it yourself by hard KPIs. And of course, there we come again to the topic of data storytelling, of making sure that we collect all of the data sources. And there's a lot of traditional data there, but also non-traditional, like satellite imagery. We can often take that into account for sustainability if we look at companies that are in the agricultural sector or the maritime sector and are working over very large areas. So there's a lot of data out there that can be used for this topic. It has to be integrated somehow. So you need the hard data, you need alternative data, you need the data sentiment that you get from social and other news sources to get really the overall picture, and that really then helps you pitch your strategy. And ideally, then if you did everything well, if you become more sustainable, if you communicate that out nicely, then we will also hopefully see it in our sentiment and our digital intelligence that, oh yeah, it worked. The public, it worked for you internally. You have the hard KPIs, but also the public acknowledges it on your brand. And that is something where it's very powerful if you look also over the longer timescales, because while we still consider social media as new, I mean, those companies have been around for 10 plus years for the most part. And therefore we have a lot of historical data and we can see how everything has developed over time. And that is, of course, also something super interesting to be looking at.
Well, I don't have any more questions.
Benedikt, any last words?
Maybe just to conclude, like often we hear there's too much data out there. So our clients say we have too much data we can't see. I think it's not the fact that there's too much data. It's around kind of like being efficient in filtering out the data. So for us, it's good that there's a lot of data, but we struggle sometimes kind of like to filter out. And that's, I think, the key point.
Yes, from a data scientist perspective, there's never too much data.
I'm sure. Okay, well.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yes, it was a pleasure having you, and have a nice day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all for today. This is TechTalk, technology made simple over a cup of coffee. Thank you for listening, and until the next episode.